Recording. Okay. All right. So here we're gonna design Connect 4 here, and this is what I will put on my website. It'll just kind of be the standard uh, 8x8 Connect 4 grid. All I'm doing here is just drawing 8 vertical lines, 8 horizontal lines. I have an 800 by 800 pixel grid. So each square is basically 100 by 100 pixels. And I have a board which is holding 8 by 8 zeros, ones, and twos. So it's an int two-dimensional array. So each square holds what's in the square. It's either empty, which right now they're all 0 because they're all empty. If it's a 1, it's going to hold if a gold ball is there. I'm doing gold and silver as opposed to red and black just because they came standard in Greenfoot. So it's just one less thing to look up for image. But it'll still work the same if you want to find a red and black image. So the first thing we got is, if you think about how Connect 4 is played, if the silver dropped right here, the ball would go all the way down until it would get to this row. And I'm calling that the row right here, right? It'll stay on this column, but it goes down until it doesn't have any, until it hits something below it. Okay, and one thing just to kind of touch base, this is row 0, this is row 1, this is row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, row 6, and row 7. And column 0, 1, 2, 3, this would be column 4 in my example. But that's because that's where we clicked. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here in the world is I'm going to create a turn, which is just going to keep track of whose turn it is. You could also do this with a Boolean, but I'm just going to do 1 and 2 just because I have this. I think it'd probably be easier with a Boolean, but I'm just going to do 1, 2 since I called gold and silver 1 and 2 here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, so first we have to get some input from the mouse. So this is a static method. The Greenfoot class, it gives you a mouse info. Now, what mouse info is going to tell you things about the mouse? What button are you clicking? What XY coordinate is the cursor currently at? Things like that. And if my cursor is over here, then M is actually null. Null is like the default for an object, but if it has to be into the grid, into the 800 by 800 world before it is not null. So one thing we can do is just say if M is not null, and I'll also check if M's button is 1. Now what that means is you're actually clicking the left button. Okay, so if it's not null, which means it's in the grid, and I'm clicking the left button, I'm gonna do first. I'm going to do int x is going to be m.getX. That is the mouse click, the x coordinate of the mouse click. Now that's going to determine which column we are in. Okay. Now if you thinking about some math here, let's say I'm on pixel 123. 123. If I divide that pixel by 100, I would get 1, because integer division rounds off and kind of chops off any decimal place, right? So it'd be 1, and that's what column I'm in. And if I'm at pixel 690 and you divide it by 100, you get 6. This is column 6. Okay, so really to get the column, I can just divide by 100. So I'm going to do int col equals x divided by 100. Okay, and I'm going to do int row, which is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the bottom, and actually how many rows this thing has is 7. or no, excuse me, it's 8. One less than that would be 7, which is the last row. I generalized that to be the length minus 1. That's what I need to do. Because if we change the sides, it would still work. If you did a 10 by 10 connect 4 grid, it would still work. Okay, so I'm putting it at the bottom. So this is row 0, row 1, row 2 goes down. Or they get bigger as they go down. So I'm starting at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep increasing the row until I get a square that doesn't have anything there. So for example, this is what I had before. This is actually column 3, but so if I touched here, anywhere in this column, I would start at this cell and keep, that's actually decrementing or subtracting 1 from the row. I'm going up until I get something that's empty. So think about what that means is that this value in the array would be 0. All right, so what I'm going to do is while board row column, which by the way is the cell, it's going to give you the integer. All right, if I'm accessing this, I'm giving it a row and a column. While it is, I guess, not 0, right? Because when it is 0, we want it to stop whenever it is 0. So while it's not 0, what we want to do is actually subtract 1 from the row. So that's what that's doing, going back up until you get to a row that doesn't have anything there. So once that while loop has concluded, then that means that row is where we should put our piece. And we might have to do something here when we get to the very top, but I'm going to save that for now. All right, so what we're going to do, now we have found the row where we're going to put our piece, okay? So what we're going to do is put the piece there. So we're in the world class, we need to add an object, and we're either going to add a gold object or we're going to add a silver object, okay? Depending on turn, right? And I can do this here. If turn equals 1, which is gold, by the way. So what do I want to do? I want to add an object, which would be a new gold. Okay. And then we got to think about where we want to put the X and Y coordinate. So now add object takes the X coordinate first, which would be, so if we, and this is in pixels, right? If we took the column that we are choosing, multiply by 100. So in my example before, if I did 423, column would be, or pixel 423, column would go to 4. Now if I multiply column by 100, I would get 400. And really what I would want to put it in the middle, so let me illustrate what I'm saying here. If we did, it's fuzzy because I haven't compiled, but let's say I'm 230 as my pixel. Okay, 230, somewhere in here. Then that's going to round down to be column 2. But then if I multiply 2 by 100, I would get 200. Well, this is pixel 200 right here, kind of right here on the side. So I want the center of the image to be like in the middle of this column. So I want to add 50 to it, or whatever half of the cell length is. So let me try that. Plus 50. And then the row, which is the row that I just found out, row times 100, I think also plus 50. Because the Y coordinate is also, you're going from the top left corner down to the middle. You're adding 50 pixels. All right, and then I'm going to make turn equal to 2. And then I'm going to do an else case. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Because all this, I'm doing the exact same thing. Oh. But it's going to be silver. And I'm going to take turn back to 1. So the 1 and 2 kind of crosses. So it starts off with turn 1, add a gold, then you make turn 2. Then the next time you turn around, it's going to meet the else statement. It's going to add silver. And you're going to add turn 1. So let's see how this works in practice. What is the problem? Oh, okay. This stuff should be in the act method. So the act method is the method that actually gets called every frame. So the constructor is my world is what your world looks like whenever you, oh man. Please go that, okay, all right. So let me try this again. So cut, okay. So the act method, the constructor, this my world method, it's not really a method, but it's basically like it. It is what the world looks like whenever we construct it, create it, right? When it first starts. The act method actually starts once you hit the run key. All right, so let's see. All right, all that should work. Okay, so this run key is what makes act. Okay, so there we go. So, and we're only hitting silvers. Okay. Oh, one thing we definitely forgot to do here is if we put down a gold, then we want to change board row call to 1 to show that because the thing with the reason that why they're not stacking is because okay. The reason, and that's the other thing I missed. So the reason they're not stacking is because we were never updating the array, which is like keeping track of what the world is, basically. Like, where are my golds, where are my silvers? That's keeping track of where things are. So if I didn't change that, it's gonna, when this while loop happens, they're all zeros, right? So it's always gonna put it at the bottom row. Now this will hopefully stack them. And the reason they were doing all silvers is because I had this as turn 2. And we were always coming down here to the else case. All right, so let's try it. Now we run. All right, it's a little quick. Oh, okay, so, all right, so let's fix that. And this is how we'll wrap this first part up. So the problem, and you can adjust the speed, but then sometimes it causes issues down the road. Let's adjust it a better way. The problem is, if you hit like really quickly there, and we are going to have to do that eventually, but if you hit really quickly, it registers more than one time on the mouse, right? Because it's just like you're hitting the left key, 5 times in just a second. So it might 5 different frames says, hey, you're hitting the left key, and does it back to back. So what we can do is pretty simple. Is I'll create this timer. Okay. And all I'm going to do is every time act gets called, I'm going to increment or increase timer by 1. Okay, so timer goes, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but pretty fast. Okay, but I'm only going to allow this if statement to happen, which remember is the whole thing, right? That's where the click happens. That's where the value goes down to the row. I'm only going to let that happen if timer is greater than some amount of, I'll just say 15. I'm kind of guessing here. Timer is greater than 15. So if it's greater than 15, I'll do all this. And then what I'm going to do is set timer back to 0. So what does this do? Is this act has to get called 15 times before timer ever, or 16 times before timer ever gets bigger than 15, before it will ever, respond to this. And when it does, it's going to set it back to 0, and it's got to wait another 15 frames, right? And 15 frames is still less than a second. So you really won't notice anything, you just won't have this ability to double click. All right, so there's my one click. Seems like they're alternating. Let's see if they stack. This should be gold, silver, gold, silver. Okay. All right, I think we're at a good place to stop. We got at least the first part of the gameplay here of adding the pieces to the board, getting them to drop down to the bottom, or until they find another piece. Okay, so we're still in have some touches before we can even get going with the logic of like, okay, how do we figure out if we win or not? But it's actually not too far. All right, so we'll stop there. I'll pick up next time.